Tuesday. Hey y'all, it's Tuesday, and I know that this Tuesday is a particularly interesting Tuesday, and I'm going to tell you why. Because this is 100 years of women having the right to vote. Hooray! It's very cool. The first election that women got to vote in was the 1920 election, where the president elected was Warren G. Harding. So yay, cool. And women, I hope y'all went and voted today, and men, because voting's awesome. Everybody has a voice and they can use it. I bet you're guessing this is the book that has won today. This is our other choice. But this was definitely our winner for today. I'm really excited about reading it because it's a story that I had never heard before. And I'm really excited about breaking up the election night stress of that and sharing it with you. So here we go. Around America to win the vote. 2 Suffragists, a Kitten, and 10,000 Miles. By Mara Rockliff. Illustrated by Hadley Hooper. All right. On April 6th, 1916, a little yellow car set out from New York City. It carried tools, spare parts, a teeny tiny typewriter, an itsy bitsy sewing machine, one stout leather trunk bursting with useful things, 2 smiling women, and a wee black kitten with a yellow ribbon tied around its neck. The taller woman was named Nell Richardson. The smaller one was Alice Burke. Together, they planned to drive all the way around America. It was a great big country, but they had a great big cause. These pages are right. Okay. Votes for women, Alice told reporters. Votes for women, Nell agreed. They said the typewriter and the sewing machine were all part of their plan. If anyone said women didn't have the brains to vote, then Nell would dash off a poem right then to prove they did. And if anyone said they should cook and sew and leave running the nation to the men, then Nell would whip up an apron while Alice gave a speech to prove they could do both. And if the two of them could circle the United States, 10,000 bumpy, muddy, unmapped miles, facing danger and adventure all alone with just each other and a kitten in their little yellow car, well, that would prove that women could do anything. So off they went. That very day, they had their first adventure when a horse, pulling a wagon down a narrow road, refused to let them pass. Votes for women, Alice told the horse. Nell tied a Votes for Women yellow daffodil behind his ear. Then the horse stepped aside and let the little yellow car go on its way. In Philadelphia, they stood up on their seats to speak to the great city crowd. Nell didn't need to write a poem on her typewriter or sew an apron on her sewing machine. Men and women cheered. But the next morning, blizzard! Nell and Alice dug into their trunk of useful things. They put on their raincoats and their rubber hats and drove through howling wind and swirling snow to Baltimore. And that's funny because it said at the beginning of the book they were in April. So blizzard in April, that's pretty big. Where they arrived in time to be the guest of honor at a very fancy party. The trunk held a few useful things for parties too. The next day, when they stopped for gas, a crowd of men clustered around the little yellow car. Alice hopped up on the seat to give her speech, but no one listened, so she told them all about the car instead. "Votes for women," the men said, and waved as Nell and Alice drove away. After a quick visit to Washington, D.C., they came upon the bumpiest and muddiest road yet. The little yellow car went bump and squelch and finally got stuck. As the car sank, Nell and Alice jumped into the icy stream. They cranked and cranked and cranked the engine, but it wouldn't start. "Votes for women," Nell reminded Alice cheeringly. Alice grumbled. "And good roads." In the trunk, they found a lantern and a blanket and a box of candy from their friends. They huddled, wet and shivering, under the blanket and ate candy till the sun came up, and the two straw mules appeared to pull their car out of the mud. This was before tow trucks, by the way. In Virginia, Nell and Alice passed a school, and all the children ran to see the little yellow car. They hung all over it and wouldn't let the women, or the kitten, go until Alice promised to send them a picture postcard from someplace extremely far away. And they drove into North Carolina, passing fields of singing birds and butterflies and goldenrod. I need to know where this place is in North Carolina. I haven't seen that place. There are lots of mountains, though, in North Carolina, and they're beautiful. But they nearly fell into a hole where a bridge used to be. Next came deep puddles, sticky clay, and thick, wet sand. In South Carolina, a whole town turned out and treated them to an all-yellow lunch. How fun. I want to go to one of those. In Georgia, they joined a circus parade. In Alabama, two travelers sipped tea and nibbled on stuffed dates. Everywhere they met crowds. Everywhere Neil and Alice told them, "V for W." Outside Gulfport, Mississippi, the little yellow car finally found a mud puddle it couldn't cross. They sneaked the kitten onto the train. And smuggled it into a fine hotel in New Orleans. Then the little car arrived, and they were on their way. They dodged bullets by the Rio Grande, drove on through the desert of New Mexico, and got lost for 2 days in Arizona, till finally they reached California. When they got there, they won a medal at the fair for driving a long way to get there, all across America. But they were only halfway to the finish line. They still had lots of miles and lots of adventures on the road ahead. So, according to the picture, they've been all here. And then they're going to go all the way across from up to Oregon, Washington, Montana, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, and back to right here. All back where they started. So they're skipping a few states in the middle. But the concept's there. On September 30th, 1916, a little yellow car drove into New York City. It carried mud and dust and signatures and souvenirs from all around America. 2 smiling and sunburned women and a fully grown cat. They arrived to a grand welcome. And a great big yellow cake. The cat ate 7 slices, as reported in the next morning's Tribune. After 10,000 bumpy, muddy, unmapped miles, Nell was ready for a rest. And Alice? She turned right around and crossed the country all over again. But this time, she took the train. So, now we have to get to the fun part where they tell us that all the stuff about that actually really did happen. In the early 1900s, only the very adventurous would even try to drive across America. The first to succeed was a Vermont doctor named H. Nelson Jackson, who drove from California to New York in 1903. 6 years later, Alice Ramsey of New Jersey became the first woman to finish the cross-country trip. Neither of them traveled half as far as Alice Burke and Nell Richardson would in 1916, driving all day and making public speeches every night. By 1916, automobiles had become quite popular, but driving was still a challenge. Gas stations weren't common yet, so Nell and Alice would have stopped at country stores or farms to fill their tanks. Instead of road maps, they had to rely on the Blue Book, which gave directions like turn right at the yellow barn. I like directions like those. Which were not so helpful if the barn had fallen down or had been repainted red. Nell and Alice drove a little runabout made by the Saxon Motor Car Company. They called it the Golden Flyer. Before they left New York, it was officially christened by suffragette leader Carrie Chapman Catt, using a champagne bottle filled with gasoline. Newspapers reported that Catt brought the bottle down so hard she left the radiator with a dent. Alice also called the car their yellow baby and bragged about how well it ran. "The little baby motor car has been true to us," she wrote. "We can't blame her when she gets stuck in the mud." They even named the kitten Saxon. In turn, the Saxon Company used Nell and Alice in an ad. Like many ads, it stretched the truth, claiming the two travelers sped easily from one place to the next and were never late once. But from the Diary of the Golden Flyer by Alice S. Burke. "Yesterday we went up slowly toward a white mule that was drawing a lawn wagon, and he seemed perfectly serene, when suddenly he turned to his right and jumped wildly over a 5-foot embankment. For an instant we had a vision of the old white mule with his ears laid back flat, his tail flying out straight behind, and a long, thin wagon in the air. Then mule, wagon, and driver struck ground right side up with no damage done except the king's English, which suffered a bit when the driver told the mule just what he thought of him." April 22nd, 1916. Now this is cool right here. Winning the vote. Alice and Nell's journey may sound long and hard, but it was quick and easy compared to the journey American women undertook to win the vote. In 1776, future First Lady Abigail Adams wrote to her revolutionary husband John, urging him to remember the ladies. She said that if American men were willing to fight for independence and have a say in their own government, so were American women. John Adams wrote back, "I cannot but laugh." Soon after, he signed the Declaration of Independence, which stated that all men were created equal. Women were left out. In 1848, a group of women, including Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, held a meeting at Seneca Falls, New York. There they signed their own declaration stating that all men and women were created equal. But to make women equal under the law, they knew they had to win the right to vote. 72 years had passed since Abigail Adams spoke up for women's rights, and it would take exactly 72 more to reach her goal. The women, and some men who fought this battle, were called suffragists. Suffrage also means the right to vote. Along with Mott and Stanton, they included leaders such as Lucy Stone, Susan B. Anthony, Sojourner Truth, Alice Paul, and Ida B. Wells. They also included hundreds of thousands of lesser-known heroes like Neil Richardson and Alice Burke. These women defied husbands and fathers to march in the streets and make speeches. Every night for 6 months, Alice stood on a wooden soapbox at the corner of Broadway and 96th Street in New York City. As the years went by, the suffragists got creative. They wrote songs, drew cartoons, and one pilot suffragist bombed carnival crowds with leaflets from a plane. Another, hoping to reach coal miners, wore overalls and went down 2,500 feet below the ground. Suffragists even made the Statue of Liberty speak. The words that came out of its mouth were, of course, votes for women. The year 1916 was an exciting one. Jeanette Rankin of Montana, one of the 11 western states where women did have the vote, became the first woman elected to Congress. It was an election year for the President of the United States as well, and suffragists planned huge demonstrations to give women the right to vote. At the Republican Convention of Chicago, thousands of women and girls marched in the freezing rain behind a baby elephant draped in a rubber blanket that said Votes for Women. The next week, they held a walkless parade in St. Louis. Men on their way to the Democratic Convention had to pass between 8,000 silent suffragists lining the streets for a mile on both sides. These demonstrators came from all over the country. Many must have heard about the plans from Neil and Alice, who used their cross-country trip to spread the word. At the time of the conventions, the pair had just arrived in California, but they did not stop. The work was not yet done. The next year, the United States entered World War I. Many suffragists set aside their own goals to help win the war effort. Others, led by Alice Paul, kept up the fight. They picketed the White House, asking Woodrow Wilson why democracy abroad was more important than democracy at home. Mobs attacked the peaceful protesters, and suffragists were arrested. In prison, the women were treated badly and resisted so bravely that public opinion turned. In 1920, the 19th Amendment was officially added to the U.S. Constitution. It states, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." At last, American women had won the right to vote. Yay! Our Bible story for today. So glad to see y'all tuning in. John was one of Jesus' helpers. He was old now and living on an island, which might sound nice, except it was a prison. The leaders had put them there to stop them from talking about Jesus. But I'm sure you don't think a little thing like being in a cell, in a prison, on an island, in the middle of an ocean, would stop God's plan, do you? One morning, Jesus appeared, right there in John's cell. Jesus' eyes were bright and shining like the sun. "I'm going to show you a secret, John," Jesus said, "about when I come back." His voice was like the sound of rushing waters. "Write down what you see so God's children can read it and wait with happy excitement." Then Jesus gave John a beautiful dream, except John was wide awake and what he saw was real, and one day it would all come true. "I see a throne, and on the throne is a king, and the king is Jesus. All around the throne, people are bowing down. They are giving him their treasures. There are loud cheers and clapping and bright laughter like 1,000 waterfalls, and everyone burst out singing a new song. This is our King, the Lamb who died so we don't have to, our rescuer. All honor and glory forever and ever. And every creation everywhere in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea joins in. And then from all around a wide, immense, beautiful silence. And I see Satan, God's horrible enemy, thrown down and defeated. I see a sparkling city, shimmering in the sky, glittering, glowing, and coming down from heaven and from the sky. Heaven is coming down to earth. God's city is beautiful, walls of topaz, jasper, sapphire, wide streets paved with gold, gleaming pearl gates that are never locked shut. Where's the sun? Where's the moon? They aren't needed anymore. God is all the light people need. No more darkness and no more night. And the king says, "Look, God and his children are together again. No more running away or hiding. No more crying or being lonely or afraid. No more being sick or dying, because all those things are gone. Yes, they're gone forever. Everything sad has come untrue. And I have wiped away every tear from every eye." And then I heard a deep, beautiful voice saying, that sounded like thunder in the sky, "Look, I am making everything new." It was hard to squeeze all of what John saw into words and fit it on a page and cram it into a book. All the words on all the pages of all the books in the world would never be enough. "I am the beginning," Jesus said, "and the ending." One day, John knew, heaven would come down and mend God's broken world and make it our true, perfect home once again. And he knew, in some mysterious way that would be hard to explain, that everything was going to be more wonderful for once having been so sad. And he knew then that the ending of the story was going to be so great, it would make all the sadness and tears and everything seem like just a shadow that is chased away by the morning sun. "I am on my way," said Jesus. "I'll be there soon." John came to the end of his book, but he didn't write the end, because, of course, that's how stories finish, and this one's not over yet. So instead he wrote, "Come quickly, Jesus," which perhaps is really another way of saying to be continued. Alrighty then, we are excited for next week, because next week you get an opportunity to vote again for something much more fun. So, let us grab the yellow book. Alright. What book shall we read next week? I don't know. Let's find out. Another pigeon book! I love these books. They're fantastic. The Pigeon Finds a Hot Dog, or The Rainbow Fish. So these are our choices for next week. Pigeon or a fish? Thanks for joining us tonight. So good to be online with all of you and share fun books with you. And I look forward to seeing you next week.